All right. Welcome, everyone, to our Wednesday meeting, November 9, for Naples Mac Friends User Group Worldwide. I'm your host, MC Dan Wasink, and today, our goals here at NMUG, I'm trying to switch things around here a little bit. So, but basically our goals here at NMUG, as most of you know, is to try to foster a community to share and help each other with our Apple devices. We do this by having an entertaining and informative guests, such as today's guest, Josh Summers. And then also we're going to start classes in January, and these are a little bit more in-depth classes on everything. And then we also try to help each other through Groups.io. So that's a separate board that if you have questions, it's a great place to ask them. And then hopefully another member or one of us can help you out with that. Where you can find the latest information is on our website, naplesmug.com. And it's also where you can go to our Groups.io, which I previously mentioned. Like I said, we're trying to transform this into an area where you can, seek help. If you're having a problem with something or anything like that, go to our Groups.io and hopefully one of our members, or such as myself or Sheeta or anyone else, can kind of help you out with that. Anyone can sign up for our membership for our thing. Just go to our website, just send them over to our website, naplesmug.com, and there's a form there, and Mike will forward that on to Eckert, and we can get you a free trial or anything, or get your friend, family member a free trial. And hopefully if they like it, what they'll do is they'll sign up. That's our goal. Our president is Eckert. Eckert, do you have anything that you'd like to say?
Very little, except that I notice that we have some visitors from overseas today, which we really enjoy. But one of them is from my own hometown, from Hamburg, Johannes. He just signed in and said hello, and I would like to reciprocate, to respond to that. I'm very happy to have someone from my hometown attending the meeting today. But other than that, you're all welcome. I think it's going to be an exciting meeting. And as always, you're doing a great job, Dan. Carry on, and I'm looking forward to Sheeta as well. Doing a great.
I was going to say, do you want to mention anything? Last week you promoted me a little bit. You want to promote Sheeta a little bit?
Yeah, but I will do that when I have more information about her. She's he's on next week.
Okay, got it. All right. Speaking of Sheeta's going to help us keep us in line and monitor all the questions and all that. I recommend everybody open up their chat so that they can monitor. That's where we answer a lot of the questions as well. So it's a good thing to monitor. You have anything you'd like to add, Sheeta?
No, I'm good.
All right. Today we have Josh Summers, and he's going to be talking about internet security. And if you're looking for tips on how to improve your security online, Josh is the guy. I read a little bit on his bio. He's been a victim of identity theft, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but I think that I read that. And he's basically made it his goal to help others protect their privacy and things like that. So that is what Josh is going to be talking to us about. So on that note, Josh, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Dan, and Sheeta and Eckert and everybody that's been involved. I think this is the third year now that I've been able to join you guys, and it has been obviously a real pleasure. I'm grateful to be able to do that. I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and I want to make sure that everybody can see what I'm putting up. Dan, can you give me a confirmation, or Sheeta, that you're able to see what I've got here?
Yep,
you are good.
Perfect. Great. All right. Well, as Dan said, a lot of my passion revolves around helping what I would consider to be normal, everyday netizens, people who access the internet with practical, I'm going to say basic, but not because I'm trying to dumb it down, just the things that are the best practices for internet security. A lot of this stuff you guys have probably heard maybe in the past, but I'm hoping to maybe reframe some of this in a way that'll help you see it in a new light. And so when I talk about it, and I go around and talk about internet security a lot, I get a lot of different responses from people. You have the people who are paranoid, right? And they are just worried that, the government's out to get them. And they have to, there's somebody that's able to see into their phone, and they've got to figure all this stuff out, everything is a risk to these people. And then you got people that just feel like they have to get completely off the grid. Thankfully, that doesn't include this group, I don't believe, but people who just think, hey, I've got to delete Facebook, I got to use a dumb phone, I've got to, all of these things that kind of remove you from the perceived threats to your security and privacy. And then, of course, you've got a lot of people who are just living on a password and a prayer, which is the way I like to say. It's just, I set up a password and I'm just praying that it's strong enough that it will do what it needs to do, and I don't have to worry about this anymore. And so what I want to do today is give you a framework to start thinking beyond some of this, but also make sure that we're all on the same page to just be realistic here, that 100% security is a myth, right? I think everybody has hopefully been, well-versed by now to know that, it's kind of a myth that if you own an iPhone or a Mac computer that you don't get viruses. Like, that's been something that has been said many times, I've heard in the past, and it's just not true. And even, I've already seen one question that's come up, and I talk about this a lot, but I've got this 2FA YubiKey that I use, and it's great. And I highly recommend using that and a password manager, all of these great tools. But even that does not mean that you are 100% secure. Like, all of these things are just they're best practices to make sure that that you are not the lowest hanging fruit. And that's kind of what I want to do, is I want to make sure, because I can sit here and try to talk about all the different threats and the new scams that are coming up, but those things are changing all the time. They're constantly morphing. And so because these threats are changing and these new scams are being created, we need to start thinking of this a little differently. So before I dive into my thing, I'm going to put this up at the very end as well. All the different resources that I'm going to share, I'll put up here at allthingsecure.com/NMUG for you guys. It also includes a checklist if you felt like you wanted to download that. It's completely up to you, but I just wanted to make sure that resource was available for you. Okay, so let's imagine for a moment that your digital security, sometimes it's so esoteric. Like, we can't, it's not concrete enough for us to really grasp what's happening in the internet world. So let's look at it, let's think of it kind of like our house. There are 4 things that you really need to start thinking, that you need to think about your house, that will help you protect it as much as you can, right? Oh, I lost my, hold on just a moment. Okay, there we go. So the first thing you want to do when you're looking at protecting your house, right, is you want to assess the vulnerabilities that you might have, right? Where are the doors that someone could come into? Where are the windows that that somebody could break into? What are the most vulnerable areas of your house? And so whenever you're thinking about anything having to do with your online security, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to assess. We want to look at what your vulnerabilities are. Next, we want to obviously protect the things that that you have, right? Some of us have a physical safe in our house where we put things. Obviously, you want to lock the door to your house, hopefully. Some of us may live in a neighborhoods where you don't feel like that's absolutely necessary. But you want to take and recognize that the things that are of value in your house and lock them up. So, for example, I'm not going to take a couple of papers and pens and lock that up in my vault, in the safe in my house. I'm going to take let's say jewelry or passports or things that are truly of value. And so protecting is understanding what those things are of value. And a lot of times I recognize that a lot of people don't know, especially in the digital world, what they have that's of real value. So we're assessing, we're protecting. Then we need to monitor. This is huge because, again, like I said, we don't know what the next threat is going to be. And so monitoring for some of that stuff is what helps us be able to stave off new threats that might be coming in. So monitoring could be anything from, monitoring your personal data, monitoring your financial data, monitoring, just making sure that nothing looks wrong with your device as you're using it. All of these things are just part of monitoring what you have. And then finally, we need to screen. And this is probably one of the most important things that we can do, and most people just completely forget about it. Here's what I mean by screen. You can have the greatest security system in the world in your house. You can have the strongest locks on your door. And yet, if someone knocks on your door claiming to be let's say a cable repairman, and you open the door and let them in, all of that security goes out the window because you have let them in. And that is, more than anything else, the greatest threat to most of our online security are the things that we let in ourselves. So we've got all this, we've got password managers, we've got 2FA keys, we've got all this great stuff. But then we get an email that says something that catches our attention, and we want to click on that link, and we actually let them in. And that is one of the biggest problems that I see for a lot of people. So what I want to do, I think of this as maps, right? We want to map out the best way to secure ourselves online. And so that translates to monitoring your data, your identity, assessing your digital footprint, protecting your digital assets, and then, as I said just a moment ago, screening incoming requests for your data or for any type of cooperation. So as you're thinking about this framework, I've set it up as maps so that hopefully it'll be a little bit easier for you to remember. And we're going to go through each of these points individually, talk a little bit about screening incoming requests, and then at the end of that, I'd be more than happy to answer as many questions as I possibly can. So I think before I do that, I just wanted to mention that I think it was said by Sheeta before we got started, but please feel free as we're going along to put those questions in the chat. And so that way you don't forget them, or if you want to write them down, you could do that as well. But if you want to just put them in the chat, and that way we can walk through, and more than likely, a lot of these questions might even be answered as we go along. Okay, so what does it mean to monitor? As we think about all the ways that we have our digital lives are out there, a lot of this involves just our personal data, but not just that, but also our financial data. The unfortunate reality for those of us that are in the US, but even now, even those people that are in the UK or in Europe, or it's starting to happen all over the world, there are credit monitoring agencies that are always scraping and gathering your data, whether you want them to or not. It seems really weird to me, but you cannot call up any of these credit reporting agencies and ask them to delete your data. They can have this data, and they do have this data. And unfortunately, that poses somewhat of a risk to all of us. So in the US, you could actually go in and monitor your personal credit by going to annualcreditreport.com. In the EU, you can check yourcreditreport.eu. There's this one for Australia. One of the things that I've noticed a lot of people forget to do is thinking about their spouse or even their kids. I'm thinking obviously for myself as a younger man with kids that are age 10 and 5. I know that they don't have credit cards yet, but people can still steal their credit that they haven't yet built up. And so I monitor even my kids' credit, because I want to make sure that I'm looking and seeing what's happening, because I can't always stop it. But the sooner that I can discover what's happening, the sooner I can make those changes. So there's a couple things you can do here, right? Is you can check your personal credit. That's part of what I'm showing right here. In the US, you get multiple, I think, ever since COVID, it's kind of it's the Wild West. You can get as many credit reports, it seems like, as you want at this point. But the other part of it is actually a freeze. And this is something I can't remember, honestly, if I talked about this last year or not, but this is one of those free steps that you can take that if you were to, take away anything from my talk right now, today, this would be the one thing that I would hope that you would go and do. Because unless you're going out and constantly having to pull a line of credit, whether that's buying a new car, or buying a new house, or opening up a new credit card, freezing your credit is one of the few things that we can do to kind of stop any kind of financial hack or financial data breach before it even happens. So let me give you an example. I woke up one morning, this was a few years ago, and I woke up and I had text messages from Google. I had emails saying that somebody had access to my email. Was this really you? And it wasn't. And I was able to lock that down pretty quickly. But then lo and behold, that person had somehow gained access to my email account and then had gone to open up. They had found a bunch of information in my email. We tend to put a lot more information in our email accounts than we realize. So I think they had even found my social security number. And then they went and tried to open up a bank account in my name in Florida. Now, I lived in Texas at the time. And thankfully, I had monitoring set up. And I was able to call this bank and tell them that wasn't me. But if my credit had been frozen at that time, they wouldn't have even been able to open that credit card account at all because it would have been frozen. So freezing your account is the act of calling up, or actually you don't have to call up, is going on to the websites of these credit reporting agencies. There's 3 major ones in the US. There's a 4th one I hear a lot about. And then there's a number of others that you can just go on and they will allow you to freeze your credit. So like I said before, swift action minimizes damages. And now that I think about it, I don't even think that I've got an entire web page or article about how to freeze your credit. And I'll make sure that I put that on the resource web page that I had put up earlier so that you can have that, because I highly recommend if you haven't frozen your credit and that sounds like something that would that you would work for you, then you can do that. So you can monitor your banking. This is something I usually say this a lot to the younger generation, but it's funny to the older generation. This is not nearly as much of a problem, because I think that my generation and then my parents' generation just grew up reconciling their bank account every single month. But like younger than me, in their 20s and 30s, that's just not a common thing anymore. People do not reconcile their bank accounts, and it just blows my mind. It baffles my mind that people don't reconcile their account every month. And that is where you can really spot credit card fraud. And it just happened to me 3 months ago, where I don't know exactly where it happened, but I started to see these Google Store charges on my credit card account, and I had to get it shut down. And it was incredibly inconvenient for me, because one thing I don't think Dan mentioned when he was introducing me is that I actually live in Thailand. So I don't know if you guys, you can, like, this is my window. It's black out there because it's almost midnight for me right now. And so, I mean, it's great. I love living in Thailand. I've been here for a few years, but shipping a credit card from the US and getting a new one out here is just a really big pain. Anyway, when it comes to monitoring your banking, you can also set transaction alerts that come to you via email or text message. So, for example, with a lot of banks, you could go in and say, hey, any charge over the amount of, let's say, $100, $200, $300, whatever it is that works for you, you can have them send you an email or a text message alerting you that charge has been made. And so that way, if you do see this charge for $500 come through that you didn't spend, that means you can instantly call up your bank and say, that wasn't me. And the quicker that you can make those kind of calls, or those just reaching out to the financial institution, the easier it's going to be to fix those things. And then always beware the auto payments and hidden subscription stuff. That happens a lot. every once in a while I have to go in and make sure that my family doesn't have like these subscriptions to some app that's just been going on for months and months and months. And I like to make sure that I go through and check what auto payments are happening. So when it comes to monitoring solutions, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on the free side. Like I said, if you're willing to set a credit freeze, I recommend you do that, especially if you don't pull credit that often. You can always thaw that. It's known as thawing the freeze. So let's say that I have a credit freeze and I'm going to go buy a car, or I do need to go open a new credit account. All I have to do is go back onto these websites where I had to create an account and then thaw that freeze, and it happens immediately. And then you can go back and refreeze your credit. Set a calendar to remind yourself to check your credit report. If you see on the right side here on the premium side, you can pay a service like Identity Force, or there's so many others that are out there that you can use that will monitor your credit for you. And everybody has their own opinion on this. My opinion is, unless you have been hacked or you've had a data breach in the past, I feel like sometimes Identity Force or something like a identity monitoring solution is a little overkill, especially when you can check your credit report for free. But here's what I think: that if you're the type of person that I'm not going to check my credit report every quarter. Like, it's just not something I'm going to do. Well, then maybe spending a little bit of money and getting a credit monitoring service might not be a bad idea. On the free side, I would set those transaction alerts and reconcile your bank account. On the premium side, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but you've got 1Password. I know that you guys have talked about 1Password in the past because it's come up in previous talks from the past couple of years. And then I use something called Delete Me to kind of monitor new personal data that's popping up online. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So this is the monitoring side, right? We're looking at, hey, how can we monitor what's happening around us? But we can't really easily monitor what we don't know we need to protect. And that's where it comes to assessing what it is in your digital life that that's out there. And that's what's known as your digital footprint, okay? We all have a digital footprint, and I'm just going to go ahead and open it up for a moment just for fun. If you can, go into the chat and type in what you think, what would be an example of your digital footprint. Just if you're willing to, just jump into the chat. What do you think fits into that category of your digital footprint? I'd love to hear what you say. Cookies, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Purchases, exactly. Thank you, Tom. That's your digital footprint. Health information, that's digital. Yeah, Facebook, social media, emails, your fingerprint, biometrics is definitely starting to become part of our digital footprint. Searches, location, great. Okay, you guys definitely are on. You understand where I'm getting. So here's an example. You got emails sent, reviews that you've posted, online search history, text messages, purchases, like what was said earlier, the email address that you give out, social media, unused accounts. That's one that's becoming more and more of an issue, where people set up accounts and they did it years ago and they completely forgot about it. LinkedIn profiles, mobile apps, websites you visited, the cookies that somebody mentioned, comments that you posted. All of this is your digital footprint. Now, some of this you can't take back. I mean, quite frankly, it's out there. It's out there. What can you do? But there are things you can do to kind of pull away some of the stuff that's already out there, and then steps that we can start to take to make sure that we're not constantly putting more, creating a larger digital footprint. And I would like to mention here that, social media, let me see. Oh, that's not supposed to do that. There we go. In my experience, for my parents, social media tend to be the part of their digital footprint that has been the most challenging for them. Whether that's getting, fraudulent friend requests from people, or even just what they post on their social media, has been, something that we've had to communicate a lot about. So I want you to look for a moment. If you were to search for me on Facebook, and let's say you were able to find me, this is what you'd see. You would see my photo, and you would see my name, and then you would see nothing about where I work, about where I went to school. You would see nothing about where I live or even what friends I have. I share only two photos. Sorry, my profile photo, which you see, and then with my wife here, and then the little background photo above. Those are the only two photos that you can see unless you are a friend of mine. And that's something that's really easy to do, to go into your social media accounts and make it private. Because unless you're running a business of some sort, or you need to have some brand where you're displaying everything, you're selling some trinket or something that you've made, you don't have to have your social media to be public, right? Whether that is social media, whether that is Instagram, whether that's Twitter, if you use Twitter at all, definitely Facebook. I think those Instagram and Facebook are the ones that I see more often than not, where you are posting a lot of stuff and not realizing that all of it is public. And if you wanted to, one of the quick checks you can make is if you go onto your Facebook page, there's usually a little button, and I wish I could show it to you right now, but maybe I'll do that later. A little button, usually it's like the three dots on the right side if you're on your desktop, and you can look at view as the public. And what that does is that allows you to see what your Facebook profile looks like for somebody that's not connected to you as a friend on Facebook. And that sometimes is really shocking for people to realize, oh my goodness, anybody can see all the photos that I post, all the posts that I post. They can see everything about me. And that can be a little scary. So why are your social accounts public? I don't really think they need to be. Understanding metadata a little bit. When I post something to Facebook or when I post something to Instagram, I actually make sure, especially if it's a photo, that I turn off the location of that photo. And that's probably a little bit beyond what we're going to talk about here, but let me see if I can just give an example. All right. So I don't know if you guys can see this. This is actually a photo that I took yesterday of my son's soccer tournament, right? And if I were to go into the information on this photo, I can look and it will show me exactly where that photo was taken. And it would show it to me on a map. You can see that map right there. And that is, anytime you take a photo on your device, there's something called metadata that is wrapped up in the digital, signature of that photo, that even when you upload it to Instagram and when you upload it to Facebook, it goes with it. Now they usually try to strip it away when it gets posted on publicly, but not always. So try to understand those privacy implications for what you're posting and making sure that you're making it as private as you can. So I would assess the personal data, ID number, especially your social security number, if you're a US citizen, or ID number elsewhere, email address, phone number, physical address. One of the things that is somewhat sobering to do that I've done for some people in the past is you go in and you type in their name. You could type in your name, for example, in Google, and let's say even just the city where you live. And then you might be surprised. I don't know if you ever remember getting the white pages or the yellow pages delivered to your door, but those things have now gone digital. And I can now easily look up somebody if I know their name and I know what city they live in, or even other pieces of information. And then I can easily get their phone number, their address, the name of all of their associates, whether that's family members, people that they're, spouses, kids, all of that stuff. There are data mining websites that gather all this information from public places like government websites, and then they sell that information. But we actually do have the right in this case to request that they take it down. So if you were to go to White Pages, for example, and find your information on White Pages, you can request that they remove it. And I've done that in the past, and they have honored that request. And then 6 months later, they scraped a new part of my data. And so I have to go back and do it again. And this is where, if you remember, I talked about this service called Delete Me. It is a paid service, so it's not for everybody. But for myself, especially as I'm a person in the online security space, I'm a little more high profile, and I want to make sure that all that kind of data is not available. And so I pay this service to constantly be monitoring for that data and taking it down for me. So again, if you were to go onto White Pages and search for Josh Summers in Texas, you will no longer find me anywhere in there. Hopefully. If you do, then we've got some other problems. But it's actually funny to me because I got to the point where I did it for myself, and then I didn't do it for my wife because I just wanted to see what happened. And so then when I started searching my wife, it was funny because now that I had been erased from their database, they told whenever you looked up my wife, they actually said that she's unmarried and that she doesn't have, she has kids, but she doesn't have a spouse. And so that was really interesting to me. You can go in and get rid of these records. All right, so I want to mention just a couple advanced recommendations. Again, please understand that these are advanced, so I don't necessarily think that everybody needs to be doing this, but there are some ways that this can be easily adopted. One example is I almost exclusively recommend people to move away from Chrome if they're willing. The Chrome internet browser, there's just a lot of tracking that happens with the Chrome internet browser. Now, it's not the end of the world. I mean, I think the Chrome internet browser has something to the tune of 60% market share. So lots of people use Chrome. You're not in the minority here. However, making that shift over to a more privacy-focused browser like Firefox or Brave, it's not as hard as it may seem. You can migrate your bookmarks over pretty easily, and it really does make a difference in terms of a lot of the trackers that come every time that you're going and visiting different websites. You might have heard a lot about VPNs. I'm not a huge proponent of using VPNs for the average consumer. I use it almost on a daily basis, but that's because I live overseas, and there are reasons mostly pertaining to internet censorship and geo blocking that happens that I want to use a VPN. But a VPN basically just it hides the location of the device. So if I'm using a VPN on my phone here in Thailand, I can make it look like this phone is located in the UK or in the US if for some reason I needed to do that. And then finally, data masking. We're talking about assessing our digital footprint. And I actually almost thought about doing my entire talk today about data masking. But I think it's maybe a little like, I don't know how much people are really interested in masking their data, because here's what happens for me. When somebody asks me for my address, I have an address that I give them, but it is not my home address. It is a virtual address, and I can check that address on my phone anytime somebody sends me mail. So I have all of my primary, whenever I'm asked to put an address for anything, I always put that address, with the exception of Amazon purchases. I have to use my home address for that if I wanted to send Amazon purchases. Same with my phone number. I have a virtual phone number. Same with my credit card. I actually rarely give out my actual credit card number. And one of the reasons is because of the problem that I just had earlier, where that credit card that I did give out got stolen. I use a what's known as privacy.com. It's free for people in the US. Unfortunately, it's only people in the US. So I'm sorry for everybody else that's outside the US and watching this. But that I can use virtual credit card numbers to pay for things online, and I actually set limits. So one example of this would be I had somebody come and do some yard work on the house that I own in Dallas, Texas. And they emailed me, I'm here in Thailand, and they said, hey, just send us your credit card number and we'll charge it for the amount of, I think it was like $600. There's a lot of tree work. And we'll just charge it to your credit card. I mean, hopefully, I haven't really gone deep into this, but hopefully you would know that if someone asks for you to send their credit card over email, red flags should be coming up. Now, I don't think that they were doing anything wrong. I think that, this is an upstanding, great company, but I should not be sending my credit card number over email. That's not the best idea in the world. So what I did instead is I did end up sending them a number, but it was a virtual number that had a limit, and it was a one-time use. So once they ran that credit card for the $600, that credit card shut down and it was no longer usable. So even if somebody were to hack into their database or steal their email or something like that, I'm not at risk there. Now, I'll get back into the address. I'm seeing some questions come up, and I was worried that jumping into the masking stuff might really open up a can of worms. So we'll address that more towards the end. But some solutions, right? If you're any takeaways that you can have here that I would suggest would be, if you have public social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram being the primary examples, see what you can do to make those private. It's really not that hard to do that, and it really makes a big difference. Delete any unused accounts if you have them that you're not like. MySpace is the one that comes up for other people, but let's say you opened a Twitter account and you never use it, go ahead and delete it. It doesn't need to be out there. That's just part of your digital footprint. And then limit the financial data sharing. That was part of what I was talking about with, how much I give out my credit card number. I want to limit that as much as I possibly can. And then change your browsing habits. That's kind of where I was talking about, a little bit with the internet browser. If you're willing to change your internet browser, and that goes a long way. On the premium side, I actually have a couple email accounts. I've got like my Gmail account that I use. That's kind of whenever people ask for an account, that I need to give an email, that's what I use. And then I have a private encrypted email account with Proton Mail. And that is what I use for my financial. If I'm talking with my CPA and we have to, provide any data or information, I do that through end-to-end encrypted email like Proton Mail. Now, Proton Mail has a free version that you can send, that you can create an account and send end-to-end encrypted emails. That is, in my opinion, Google's great. It really is. Gmail has some great offerings. They are really secure, but it is not end-to-end encrypted. So if you really want end-to-end encryption, Proton Mail is the way to go, in my opinion. All right, maybe I need to speed up. We've got just a couple more left to go. So protecting, obviously, we need to figure out what we need to protect. I'm sure you guys have heard this many times before, but I'll just go through it really quick. Are the passwords that you use unique? Longer is better than elaborate, right? So if you have a small poem that you really like, creating a password that is longer mathematically is stronger than some kind of password where it's P ampersand S5 exclamation point. If it's shorter, it's mathematically not as strong as if it was a longer password. But this is something that I think a lot of people forget, and that is, would your family have access or know how to get access to all of your accounts in case of, I'm just going to say emergency, but let's all just face it, like in case that we, pass away, what is the next step that's going to be taken for them? And that's one of the reasons why I like using a password manager, is because it is easier to pass down that kind of information to my family. But my parents, for example, they have a notebook, and it's a physical notebook, and they keep their passwords and all that stuff in that notebook. Now, it is It is a little bit hidden in that, like, they use code that I know because they've communicated that code to me. So I know what they mean in this little notebook. And so if something were to happen to my parents, I know where to get that notebook, and then I know how to use that notebook. So does your family know what to do in the case that you pass away? And so then that's where I think password managers become very useful. All right. I use 1Password. There's Dashlane, there's KeyPass. There's a lot of these. I'm not going to try to say that one is super better than the other. I've just used 1Password for the longest, and it's incredibly user friendly. I really like their team. And so it's the one that I end up recommending. But just having that password manager that creates strong passwords for you and then make sure that each of those are unique, that is just a huge way, and that's just baseline security. And then two-factor authentication. I know that I've talked about this before in the past. Two-factor authentication is kind of like the deadbolt on your door, right? You can lock your door and then have a key, to unlock it on the outside. But imagine for a moment that you got a deadbolt that doesn't have that key lock on the outside, right? So if you can really only lock it if you're inside the house. And that's kind of what 2FA is, where I can only get into my account if I have this 2FA key. I've got a couple of them as an example here. I don't know how easily you can see this, but like this is one that I keep on my keychain that has USB-C and then a lightning adapter, which is useful for obviously an Apple iPhone or some older iPads. And then I've got a USB, just regular USB-A that I could use for an older computer or something like that. I tend to use this one a lot. I saw a question that had come up at the very, very beginning. Somebody had purchased a 2FA key and had trouble with it. First of all, I'm sorry that you'd had trouble with it. Hopefully, once you get it set up, you don't have to plug in your key very often. But that one of the reasons why I got this one, and this is, if anybody's interested, this is called the YubiKey 5 CI. And the reason why I got the CI is exactly for one of the reasons that they said is they were having trouble using it with their iPhone. When I have this lightning cable, I can actually use it and plug it into my phone. And now I can use that key on my phone as well as my computer. And I have multiple keys because I want to have a backup. And so I keep one key with my wife and one other key. I actually have an additional key elsewhere, and then I keep one key on me. I've talked about this in past years. There's different kinds of two-factor authentication when you're protecting what you have, all your different accounts. There's SMS, that's where you get a text message with a code. There is an authenticator app. And I think I've shown that to you before, but if you've never seen it, I'm just going to go ahead and show this to you. The Authenticator app has codes that are timed. It's called a timed base one-time passcode, where once this blue circle expires, it's going to give a new 6-digit code. And so anytime that I wanted to log into, one of my accounts, I would put in my password, and then it would ask me for this 6-digit code. So I would have to open up my app, and you're going to see it's about to change here to a new code. I'm showing you this because these are all dummy codes. This is not my real Authenticator app, but if I did want to use that, I would have to put in that 6-digit number when I'm logging in. So this is something that more and more accounts online are allowing you to add 2FA protection. You've probably seen that a lot more. Which accounts you add to FA protection is really up to you. I enjoy doing it for as many as I can, but I prioritize the high value accounts, such as my investment accounts, banking accounts, if they allow it. Some banks still have not really utilized like a 2FA key or an authenticator. They just use SMS text. Even social media, something like Facebook, you can add 2FA and it will allow you to log in. I'm going to go ahead and look at the chat just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Gmail is the plague. Different accounts require different authenticator apps, big nuisance. That I would actually want to push back on that, Jerry. and say that there are a lot of, it's not app-based, it is a protocol. So what that means is you may see a website that says you have to use Google Authenticator. That's not true. That's just, everybody is aware of Google Authenticator. You can use any authenticator app. It's really just, it's a code. And it's an algorithm. So all you need is like there's Microsoft Authenticator, there's Authy, there's Google Authenticator. Heck, even 1Password can store all of your 2FA codes if you wanted it to. And that can be done either through, just scanning the QR code, or there's usually, you can copy and paste the manual code. But you don't have to use one particular app for one particular account. I could use Google Authenticator for all of them, or I could use Authy for all of them. So I do feel like that was something worth saying. All right, let's see here. Other areas to consider here, data backup. That's just a good idea for most people that don't realize that all it takes is one lost device, and you could lose a lot of precious things to you. Wi-Fi routers. Please make sure that you have a good password on your Wi-Fi router. And then finally, software updates. This is something that I do to my mom every time that I come over to the house, is I log onto her computer and I basically go through and update all of the software on her computer, because she doesn't do it, and it's not set to auto update. There's a reason that software updates happen nowadays. And it used to be this fear that if you update, you may get, all these different bugs or just difficulties with the software. And that happens from time to time, but more often than not, what's happening is they have found some kind of vulnerability in the software that could be exploited by somebody, a malicious actor. And this software update stops that from happening. So I highly recommend, if you're, if it's whether it's a phone OS update or whether it's your computer, to make sure that you're updating that. All right, so solutions on this: do a password audit. Just make sure that of your most important accounts that you are that you've got the strongest passwords that are available to you. Settle on a password storage method. If you use 1Password or some kind of password manager, awesome. If you don't, then make sure that whatever you're doing is secure in some way, and that it can be passed down or understood in the case of an emergency. I would recommend to use a 2FA app or the 2FA key, and then change your router password if it's, well, that's I don't know. That's something I generally recommend to a lot of people, but maybe that's more of an advanced something. So take that with a grain of salt on the changing your router password. I just make sure that you have a router password, which most do right out of the box when you get it set up by your internet service provider. But in case not, just make sure that you've got that password. I'm going to stop for a moment. What about facial recognition? And a question by John Lane. A lot of times when we're dealing with biometric login stuff, especially when it comes to your iPhone, as far as what Apple tells us, now I'm not going to claim that I've dug into all of their code and everything to verify this, but as far as what Apple tells us, all of that information is stored locally on your device. So that kind of eliminates hopefully any security concerns of that kind of data being elsewhere in the cloud, or uploaded to Apple's computers or whatnot. All of that stuff, whether it's your fingerprint or your Face ID, should be stored only locally on your device. And then what is the difference between passkeys and passwords? I think it kind of depends on, I'm not exactly sure what you're taught, like what use case this is. Obviously, passwords are things that you would type in. Passkeys, at least as far as what I'm talking about here with 2FA keys, is an additional. So 2FA stands for two-factor authentication. It's an additional factor of authentication, so that after I type in my password, if I have 2FA enabled, the account will request that I either type in the code, or in the case of this key, that I plug the key into my computer and then I just tap it and it should work. I find Apple hide my email somewhat unreliable. Yeah, there's some ways that when you're masking your email address, I think that's still something that's needs to be improved upon. I'm going to continue on just so that I can keep going. I forget. Dan, can you remind me what my time frame is here? I don't want to overstep my bounds here.
I'll keep you in line. Don't worry.
Or Sheeta. Okay. All right, great. Sorry, Sheeta, I don't see your face. I just saw Dan's here on
That's all right.
screen,
No problem.
So.
No problem.
So screening is really determining who and what you can trust. And that's the thing is the internet is kind of tempting to move into this trustless framework where, you know, it's decentralized. And I mean, maybe we're going to get there at some point, but right now, as far as all of us are concerned, we have to put our trust somewhere. We have to trust, whether it's Apple trusting, you know, that they're going to take care and actually honor their privacy promises to us. We have to trust them or decide whether we're going to trust them. And that's something that you need to determine for yourself. The top frauds, this is from 2019. It really hasn't changed that much over the last couple of years. Romance scams are a big one. Imposter, like somebody posing as an IRS agent. All of these are like the big types of dollars lost. And this is for people that are ages 60 and over. So it kind of skews differently depending on the age range. But really it's about the prizes, it's about the government, and it's about the romance scams. And you really need to be careful about who you trust in these cases. The median individual loss, and this is where I think it's important that you just be humbled by the fact that it's unfortunate that the higher the age, the higher the losses. You're more likely to lose more money, and the monetary loss is higher the older you get. Let me see, longest since I got any Nigeria letter.
When you're ready to answer questions, I do have some questions I would really like you to get to. So whenever you want to take a pause.
Let me see where I'm at right here. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a pause right here. And I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And yeah, let's.
Okay. First of all, Liam, are you still there and want to unmute yourself? You have a very interesting question for Josh about these browsers. And Liam's question, if Liam doesn't unmute himself, Liam's question is, why didn't you mention the Safari browser when you were talking about privacy?
Yes. And that just actually boils down to my own personal philosophy. I do think that the Safari browser is a good browser. If the choice is between Chrome and Safari, I would push you towards Safari. The reason why I don't use Safari is really more because of what I want to do is I actually want to split up. I don't want one company controlling too much of what I do. And that is why I tend to stay away from, that's why I don't use KeyPass with Apple, not because I think it's not secure, but because I don't want Apple to have all of my browsing data, all of my password data, all of this stuff all together. I tend to want to split that up between different companies so that I use one password for my passwords. I use Brave or Firefox for my internet browser, and then I use obviously Apple for my devices, my phone, my text messaging, that kind of stuff. So if the question is Safari good? The answer I believe is yes, it is a good and better than using Chrome if that's your only option.
Okay, here. Don Peacock, can you unmute yourself and ask you a question about the virtual credit cards?
Yes. Hi, Josh. I use Citibank, and they're very good about virtual credit cards. You can have it good for up to 2 years. You can have it expire in the same month. The only thing, and it has a credit limit, but you can't get a one-time thing. If you have it expire, say in 3 months, and you say $400 a month, somebody could charge $400 a day is what it seems like. But anyway, they're very good. Bank America used to have them, but they've discontinued that feature.
Yeah, there are, and that's something you can check because there are a lot of banks that are offering this as a feature more and more. And it does, especially when you're buying online. So, use your card if you're at Starbucks or if you're, going out to buy something in person. But when you're dealing with online purchases, if your bank gives you that option, it's not a bad idea to use a virtual card.
The best thing is for subscriptions, I give a virtual card and it automatically, when they try to renew a year later, if I want to continue, I get their message that says I need to update my card, and I either ignore it or update it if I want to continue.
Exactly.
All right.
And I'll mention, since people, sorry, Cheetah, I'll just real quick.
Go ahead.
We had people ask about PayPal and using Apple Pay. And I think that both of those are also good options. And the reason being, because when you do pay with PayPal, or if you've noticed this, if you're paying with Apple Pay in person, if you were to look at the credit card number that the merchant receives, it's different than your actual credit card number. And again, what we're doing is we're masking your actual information so that they don't have that. And so, yes, I think that PayPal is a decent option, and Apple Pay is also really good.
Thank you. But where do you get yours? What do you use a bank?
Don.
Okay.
Don. Thank you. we try to be fair. All right. Okay.
But that was my question.
Go ahead.
I use privacy.com is the one that I use.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Don. Okay. Jill Patton, you have a question about freezing your account. Jill wants to know, she's getting messages from her bank offering free credit score. And she wants to know, can this same entity, can she trust this same entity to work with her to freeze her credit account?
Thank you. I couldn't unmute.
Okay, go ahead, Jill.
Yes, it's I don't need to apply for credit anywhere, so I haven't really bothered answering, looking at it. But it's something called TransUnion, I think, and it's NatWest Bank here in the UK, and it's a legitimate message. But I haven't followed it up. Should I? And should I see whether they can freeze whether I can freeze my credit by doing so?
Yes. Here's my recommendation, because you have to remember that all these credit reporting agencies are for-profit companies. So if you're receiving a message from them, and it's not in their best interest to freeze your credit. So they're not going to voluntarily say, hey, can we freeze your credit? What they're probably going to offer you is some kind of credit lock or a different product. But there is a way for every single one of these. Legally, they have to allow you to create a freeze. And that's where, I can't remember if you said it was Experian or whatnot, but there is a specific web page for Experian where you can go in and request a freeze. And I think in your case, especially since you're not going to be pulling out any more, needing any more credit, it would be a very good idea to do that whenever you can.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jill. Appreciate the question. Judy Spann, can you unmute yourself and ask a question about your emails?
Yes, I've been receiving a couple emails from friends, quote unquote, in my contact list that are asking, do you use Amazon? Which is an odd question, number one. And I've checked with these friends, obviously not via email, and it was not them asking the question. What should I do with these emails?
Yes, I want to point out two things. First is there's not much you can do about those emails other than marking them as spam. Because one of two things is happening. Either it's not actually coming from your friend's email address, maybe it's just slightly, there's a misspelling somewhere, or if it is coming from your friend's email address, you need to tell them to change their password. and do that. The second thing I was going to say was that you've done something that I think is excellent, and I hope that everybody can hear this. You said something that was key there. I checked with my friend, not via email, obviously, and in a lot of these things, finding another way to verify other than the medium through which you were contacted. So if you were contacted via text message and you want to verify that this is actually your friend, don't text them back. Heck, don't even, I mean, you can call them or you find a different medium to check and verify that that is what is actually happening.
All right. Thank you, Judy.
Thank
All
you.
right. Peter Danick, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Peter, you there? Peter's question related to when you were erasing yourself from a website. And his question is, what about an address you've used for many years? Can you remove it?
It is the longer that you've lived in an address and the more that you've used it, obviously the harder that it is to go back and hide that address. So, you know, yes, I think once you've been in a place for a long time, you kind of just have to throw up your hands and say, you know, unless I'm willing to move, I kind of have to understand that I'm going to get spammed at this address and it's going to be known. But that doesn't mean there are still ways, you know, you can remove that address from these online data brokers like White Pages, Spokeo, and many others. So, you know, you can just do a search online to see what's out there with your name and address and see if it's possible to remove it.
What about those companies who offer to erase you from the internet, you know, for a fee?
Yeah, so there's a lot of fraud in that regard because there's a limit to what people can do. People can't go, like, I can't offer to do anything for you and without your login go in and erase something in Facebook. Like, nobody has that ability to be able to do that. There are things called reputation management services that attempt to manage your reputation online. And that is, I mean, we're talking about celebrities and we're talking about people that have a lot of money to pay for that. And then you have these services that are reputable, like Delete Me, that make requests to remove your data from online. But I would be very wary of anybody that claims that they can just completely erase you off of the internet, because that is virtually impossible.
All right. Charles Anthony, can you unmute yourself and ask your question about iPhone spam?
Yes, hi. I get texts and obviously calls too on my iPhone that are not from people I know, and the numbers are sometimes pretty weird numbers. Oftentimes it'll show in the on the screen report junk, and if I click on that, it deletes it, and I'm assuming it reports it to what, AT&T, Apple. I'm not sure. Does that actually do anything?
It does, I believe, but I think, you know, it's a game of cat and mouse. I think the bigger thing to think about there is I have a separate, like I just purchased an additional phone number. You can do that through, you know, a lot of different apps. Like, it's just you can look up private phone number, and just one I use is Hushed, where anytime I have to give out my phone number, I give out that phone number and not the one that actually rings my mobile. Because I want, any time that somebody texts me or calls me on this phone, I want it to be something that I want. And so the only time I give that very few people have this rings my phone number.
Right.
Everybody else gets the other phone number that is managed through an app that I manage how it gets to ring through and all that stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't get that many to actually go to that extent. Obviously, you must.
Okay.
I do click block in there,
Yeah.
but I think obviously they change the number anyway when they try to text me again. But
exactly.
I just wondering.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Charles. My question to you, Josh, at what point or what age do you start monitoring your children's credit report?
I would do it as young as your able and willing. I mean, and it's not, it doesn't even have to be a paid thing. Like I just do it. So for myself, I monitor my credit once a quarter, right? Or it's actually once every 4 months, back when you could do one credit agency per year. And so then for my kids, I just ended up doing it once a year because they thankfully haven't had any problems. But it's just really more of a, just as a safety measure, double check.
Okay. All right. I do have a question from someone who has raised their hand, and they are a titled Zoom user. I have no idea who you are, and I would like to know who you are. So go ahead and unmute yourself. And before you ask your question, can you please tell me who you are? You have your hand raised. You've patiently been waiting for some time.
She's muted.
I've asked her to unmute herself, John, or whoever this is, but I have no idea who you are. So the stage is yours. 5, 4. There you go. You've unmuted yourself. Who are you?
Ruth Muchnick.
Okay, so I've asked you to rename yourself quite a few times. I'd appreciate it if you could rename yourself or tell us who you are. Thank you. Go ahead with your question.
I don't have one.
Your hand is raised.
I don't know how that happened.
All right. Thank you, Ruth. We love it. Thank you, Ruth, very much. All right.
Okay.
All right. Did Stephen Ramirez's question, did it get answered? Stephen? Stephen had a question about the difference between
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank
I had
you.
a question between. I wasn't specific enough, and I apologize. This
All
new
right.
Apple Passkeys feature versus using passwords. That's what I was alluding to. And I guess you answered it. I was just curious if you could, the difference between using Apple's new passkeys versus what we use today, passwords. Because recently, as of yesterday, I initiated it in my Best Buy app. It had a passkey thing. Do you want to enable it? And I did. Now I use sign in with Apple as opposed to passwords. And it eliminates 3 steps. And supposedly it's more secure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're going to see that a lot. I'm sorry, Sheeta.
No, go ahead, Josh. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, you're going to see that a lot. I think that we're moving more and more towards less passwords. It's not the most secure way to do things. And so, yeah, I'm glad you've been able to find that. And I definitely think it's a great idea.
All right. Thank you. Michael Skapik, do you have a question?
I had the same question about the elimination of passwords, and how good is that? What are your opinions on it? And, what do you think about it?
I mean, I think it's a natural move towards, like, there are just different ways that we can authenticate ourselves. There's something something you have, something you are, and we're moving more away from what your passwords, and more towards what you have, a key, or even now our phones sometimes act as that, or something you are, i.e. your biometrics. And so that's where a lot of times you're logging into different apps just with your fingerprint or your face. And I think that is a good way to do it. It's much harder to steal that kind of data than it is for your password to be stolen in some kind of data breach.
Thank you.
Jerry Schultz has a very interesting question. Jerry, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. So if I sign up if I use Apple's passkey operation now, doesn't that mean, from what I have read, it seems like, well, I'm going to have to do that. Does it even work on my phone then? If I do it on my computer, will it work on my phone? And if I try to access it from, say for some reason I'm at my daughter's house and I want to access something from there. We have a family 1Password, so I could get at my password from there, but I don't know how to get at my passkey.
Yeah, that's a good point. It usually is stored with iCloud, so it will sync between your devices. But you're right. Like if you were to, it's not something that could easily be shared, and I think that's intentional. That's by design. But I think that's why you're not going to see as many, like Netflix account is not going to have you sign in with your passkey, because they recognize that, hey, you're going to want to sign in on your smart TV and your iPad and all these different devices.
Yeah, I'm not worried. So I'm not worried about sharing it. I was worried more about, will I lose access to it if I'm not, where I created it? But,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, thank you. Ronald Atchison, please, your question.
Yes, I understand that the pass key is initiated by the company rather than you, and the only company so far suggesting I should use it is PayPal. Is that right?
You're asking whether you should
The companies
use it with
themselves, do they need to set it up that they are available for use?
Yes. So, I mean, it's so a passkey is basically a cryptographic. I mean, it's similar to this type of 2FA key, except it's using your Apple account to do that. And so, I mean, if you're able to do that with PayPal, then great.
All right, thank you. And our last question will be from Mitch. Mitch, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the passkey. That's a new feature that was just introduced by Apple, and it's not. It is. The site has to allow it, and it's just not widely available, because I tried to set it up on several sites and was unsuccessful. And I did have a new scam I wanted to mention if I have time, Sheeta.
I don't think so. We want to ask. Okay, thank you. Pay every month. Lynn, oh, I'm sorry. I got to ask this question because Lynn's microphone does not work. Lynn's issue is that our employer was breached several times, the most severe being phished, where HR sent out all of our W-2 forms. Ouch. Because of that, someone filed taxes in her name and tried to take out a college loan. Do the credit services for these things when you pay every month for monitoring? I don't understand that last part. Do you understand?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Okay. I took out a LifeLock account and I pay Experian every month to monitor my credit. And I know you can put in credit card numbers and things like that, but services like that, do they check for, let's say, IRS, somebody using information there? Like I was lucky enough to catch it when they did it. And then IRS actually informed me about the college loan.
All right, great. We're running out of time, so can we be quick?
Well, that's it. I just wanted to know if those services are good in a case like that.
And I think a lot of those, it really, like LifeLock is honestly different than Identity Force or Identity Guard. They each have their own set of monitoring things. So I would double check with them and and ask them what they are monitoring for and if that will be a problem.
Right. And dark web stuff.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm in the dark web. I get notifications all the time.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. We greatly appreciate it. Sorry, everyone. Thank you for your questions. We've run out of time. And I want to thank you, Josh. I absolutely appreciate you answering all of those questions for us. And now, Dan, can you take over?
Yeah. As Sheeta said, can we thank Josh? Unmute yourself and thank him. There's a lot of good information there.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
This was a great one,
Josh. I learned a lot.
Thank you, Josh, for staying
very
up so
much,
late.
Josh.
All right. He is going to, or he put on his website, I just want to remind everyone, he put on his website, all things, I'm sorry, what is it again, Josh? Allthingssecured.com.
Allthingssecured.com/NMUG.
Yep.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
check all that out. We will also have this on YouTube in the next day or so, so you can rewatch it. So like I say, there's a lot of good information in here. So thank you. Next week, we are going to have Mike Kwasniak talk about photo books. With Christmas coming up,
Oh.
I thought,
Yes.
yeah.
You're here.
someone's
Sorry, I'm-
happy. Go ahead.
That was me. I'm sorry.
Okay. So Mike is going to be talking about photo books, which would be great, like Christmas books and things like that. So he's going to be going through all that. So you don't want to miss that. And then I'll end with, he also is Suffolk, England. He's part of that group or manages that group. And he is inviting everyone to their next meeting where they're going to be talking about limiting damage and what you can do when there's damage to your computer or your devices. And that is on Wednesday, November 30, Wednesday, 30 November. It's European time there, and 7:30 p.m. GMT. So, but anyway, just contact Mike through our site. When you go to our website, naplesmug.com, and you do the contact, that all goes to Mike, and then he can set you up with all that. So thank you, everyone. And thanks again, Josh. It was great.
Great job, Josh.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
It was a pleasure.
And thank you. It's always a pleasure having you, Josh. All right, everyone, if we could ask that you please go about your day. Bye. Leave. Have a good one. Enjoy. Be well. And thank you for joining us. See you next week.